2022 is almost over, and of course you're going to see a million end of the year lists on YouTube, and I am no different. In this video, I'm going to talk about all the albums I listened to in 2022 and just my thoughts on them. I'm going to talk about them in alphabetic order. This is not specifically a ranking, although I will tell you which ones are my favorite and which ones are my least favorite here. I don't like to make worst of the year lists, and I also don't feel like I've listened to enough albums to make a overall best of the year list, so why not throw in, I think this is 14 albums, all 14 albums, 12, 14, something like that here, and just talk about them all, tell you what I liked about them, what I didn't. Again, we are going in alphabetical order, so we are starting off with 4, featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. This is Slash's album that came out quite earlier this year. I think this is a great rock record. This is one that I listen to, and maybe not all the songs stick with you. Some do feel a bit formulaic, but there are some big standouts. Of course, one of the first singles, I think it was probably the first one, was The River's Rising. That riff, just sliding up that octave, just has stuck with me ever since. C'est La Vie was featured on my best songs of the year list, which will be linked up above here or here. I think it'll be over there. Call Off the Dogs. I mean, there's so many great songs here. It is a very well produced album. It sounds really great, and of course, Slash always finds something interesting and new to do. You still get the classic Les Paul Marshall tone, but there's still a nice spin, whether that be a talk box, something else. It may not be a groundbreaking album, but it's still a really fun one. Next up, we have a B-Sides album. This is CMFB Sides. This is by Corey Taylor. This is the B-side record to his one that came out, I think, last year, just Corey motherfucking Taylor, CMFT. That one would have been called, which I did listen to a while ago, but you know, that's last year, so I'm not going to talk about it. This one, I don't have much to say. I thought it was cool. I don't really remember all too many of the songs here, but it was just a fun time listening to them, listening to songs I'd already heard, like his cover of Sad But True, and just a longer extended versions of songs that you wouldn't really expect to hear on a record like it. It was just a fun one. Will I listen to it again? Probably not, unless I'm listening to all of his discography, but I'm not mad that I listened to it. Next up is Come On You Know by Liam Gallagher. I am a very big Oasis fan. I became a very big Oasis fan this year. It kind of switched on that, and Come On You Know is an album that I will admit disappointed me a little bit by being too overproduced and a little bit too formulaic in the way that I was like, oh, this song does sound exactly how I thought. And I think I've listened to one other of Liam's albums, which I did prefer. I don't remember which one it was. It was like a mid-2010s one, and I know a ton of people love this album. I think there are some great songs on it, but overall, it did disappoint me. I don't think it's a bad album. I don't think it's a great album. It's just very middle of the road, and it's just like, it's a weird spot in the career of Liam Gallagher and Noel, obviously. Come on, guys, just get Oasis back together. But am I mad I listened to it? No, it was worth a listen. I do want to listen to it again after I listen to all of his solo records, like a few times, to see how it compares to the other ones, but it's an okay album at best right now. Next up is one of my favorite albums of this year, of course. That is Eddie Vedder's Earthling. Now, Earthling was an album that I listened to back when it released in April, I think. As many of you know, I am a very massive Pearl Jam fan. I mean, they're one of my top 5 favorite bands. I got a picture of them right up there. That's like their greatest hits. Picture this nice, cool picture there, and whenever Eddie puts out an album, I have to listen to it, and I listened to this when it first came out, and I listened to it again last night just to remember it all and be like, okay, so I think this album is really great. There's like 2 or 3, I think there's 2 songs on like the second half of this album that aren't like amazing, but every other song has something special about it. I think that the clear standard is, of course, Eddie Vedder, but specifically his vocal performance and the energy he brings. Like, it really feels like you are listening to him on stage. It feels like he's moving around in the studio while recording. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but that's kind of the vibes I got from it, which is really great. Brother in the Cloud is one of my favorite songs of the year, and then you just have a nice kind of, you know, it's got some awesome rock songs, but also some calmer ones, lots of very deep and rich emotions. It's a very vulnerable album at times, talking lots about his personal life, and I just thought it was really amazing. Now, next up, we have a double whammy of albums coming from my musical idol, of course, Jack White. First off, of course, we're going to talk about Fear of the Dawn. this is possibly my favorite album of the year. This is easily my most listened to, and that's why I say there's another one that very closely battles it, but Fear of the Dawn is just amazing. It's experimental, not in the same way as Boarding House reached to the point where it improves. Sure, songs like Into the Twilight are not the best thing he's ever done, but a ton of these songs are just absolutely phenomenal, fuzzed out, just craziness that somehow he's still pushing the limit of what a guitar can do and what you can do with your effects, and it's just infectious, and I love it. It's Jack White, so of course I'm gonna love it, but this is easily my favorite of all his solo records. The White Raven was very high on my top songs of the year, but also Taking Me Back, Fear of the Dawn, Heidi, I mean, those are the first 4 songs on the album, and then you get to the second half, which has more underrated cuts like Shedding My Velvet. That was it. This is now, I mean, I really enjoy every single song on it. That middle section is different, but I've really come around to it as I've listened to this more. I swear I've 100% listened to this album fully over 25 times this year. It is by far my most listened to of the year, as I said before. But also we have Entering Heaven Alive, another album that is very high on my top of the list year. I can't specifically say, but this would be in the top 3 as well. I don't like it as much as Fear of the Dawn, but I listened to it again 2 days ago on Christmas, just as I was moving stuff like this and adding shelves in. And, I switched this around. If you're a common viewer, you know that this is all switched around. If it's your first video after that, well, that explains it. And this one just is so phenomenal. The contrast between the two albums. I mean, Jack explained it as Fear of the Dawn is like just perfectly, edited, Pro Tools, everything, whereas Entering Heaven Alive feels once again like those early White Stripes, any White Stripes one really, where it's just, you hit play on the tape and you play through these songs that are amazing. Madman from Manhattan and Tree on Fire from Within, All Along the Way, A Tip From You to Me. I mean, there are so many songs here that are just amazing. Not every song is like the greatest thing ever, like Queen of the Bees isn't my favorite, but they're still fun songs. I don't think there's a single miss here, although I definitely prefer the rock version of Taking Me Back to the gently one, but still, when you listen to these albums in a row, no matter if you start with this one and go to this one, or if you go to this one and then the end of this one starts off this one, I mean, it's up to you. They're 2 of my favorite records of the year, of course. It doesn't surprise me, but I think they're possibly his 2 best. Anyway, moving on from the Jack White talk, of course, that was going to be a big portion of this video, we have Harry's House by Harry Styles. Probably an unsuspected album for some of you. I am actually a pretty good fan of Harry Styles. I think that he is a great artist, and Fine Line isn't my favorite album ever, but I really enjoy his debut one, and this one is also very good. Not every song is great, and there are definitely some songs that I'm like, okay, this is a bit too poppy, but songs like Matilda, Love of My Life, I mean, these songs are really deep and just so well written and produced, and Harry's vocals once again are just amazing. I like the mix of songs on this one. It doesn't really feel like it's just way too poppy like Fine Line was for me. Like, there are still some great songs in there, let me just say that, but Harry's House is like a good mixture between that one and like it's a mature step for him. And that's what I appreciate, is that every album he feels like he is trying something new. I'm excited to see what his next project is, but there are some songs on here that really stick with you, and some of them are just fun ones, like Keep Driving. That's just a fun song, but then you have something as emotional as Matilda or Love of My Life, or even Satellite. That one, like, just the lyrics really stood out to me. Sometimes the way the songs are the choices for what else is like added on to the songs, you know what I mean? Like just random noises and stuff like that didn't, connect with me as much as it did with other people, but I still did really enjoy this album. It's not one of my favorites of the year, and I've only really listened to it once on my own and then a bunch of times with my girlfriend because she loves Harry Styles, and maybe that's why I'm enjoying it more, but it is a very good pop album, which is something that you won't hear me say a lot. Now we have an album that I've had 2 totally different experiences with. This is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar. This was the first Kendrick Lamar album that I listened to all the way through after I heard The Heart Part 5. I originally, back, if you asked me even a year ago what I thought of Kendrick Lamar, I was like, oh, he's just another one of those rappers that tops the charts, and I'm just like, oh, he's not really that good. I was completely wrong. This is not at all Kendrick's best album at all. Obviously, you guys know that's going to be To Pimp a Butterfly or Good Kid, Mad City, whatever you prefer. But this one I think is better than Damn. And when I first listened to it, it definitely threw me for a loop. I still, after 2 listens, don't love all the features here. I feel like it definitely does take down parts of the album. I think this album is at its best when it's just Kendrick talking about his own problems and what he's gone through, whether that be therapy or just the connections with other people within the past, I think, 5 years since Damn. So it's an album that has pretty low lows, and typically that's not because of Kendrick, it's because of some of the other people, and that's just because I'm not fans of some of the people that features here, or I don't know them. But the highs of this album are really great. Some songs that are equally great and not great, like Anti-Diaries. That one, I still don't know what I think about that song, but there are a ton of songs here that really struck a good chord with me, and listening to it again, it gave me a whole other perspective on this album. And if you listen to it once and you didn't really love it, try it again and maybe your thoughts will change. I don't think it's one of the best. I don't think it's one of the best he's done. This album could have been much better. It is a long album for sure. It's a double album, but it's a solid one overall. And as I said, it took a second listen, so that does say something about it, but it's a solid album. And next we go to the most surprising album of the year, I will say, and this is Not Tight by Domi and JD Beck. Now, this is an album that was recommended to me by one of my good friends. I won't say his name because he doesn't like that, but this album is kind of a jazz everything album. It's got hints of jazz, hints of rock, hints of pop, hints of every single thing you can think of. These were people that I was not familiar with, and this is their debut album. I know they've been trying to make this album for a while, and they are just absolutely insane. I reviewed this album a while back, but the musicianship that is just shown here is otherworldly. I cannot fathom how this is happening. If you watch a live video, it is mind-blowing. And then they have people like Snoop Dogg or Anderson .Paak like featured on here, and those features were really great. I know I just talked about some Kendrick features that I didn't love. The features on this album are great. Have I listened to it a lot? No, I've listened to it once all the way through, and then a few songs here and there, but I would really like to see these guys live. Maybe I will go with my friend, because just what they're doing is absolutely crazy. Did it connect with me as much as some of these other albums? No, it didn't, as my cat walks back there, but I'm just so blown away by the skill of these two artists and the amount of time and effort and production quality. It's just the quality of this album overall. It's mind-blowing. It's one that you probably haven't heard of, and I mean, go listen to it. If it's not your thing, that's totally okay. Not everything on it I love, but it's just like crazy that two people can do this. We are over halfway there now. Next up, we have Requiem by CARR. This was, I think, the first album I reviewed this year, and I am a huge CARR fan. I love so many other records. I love Jonathan Davis. I really love a ton about the band, and this album was very good. It's not one of their best, but for a band that's been going ever since the mid-90s to still be putting out a record as good as this is very impressive. Is it as good as The Nothing, which came in 2019? No, I think The Nothing is like that's top tier CARR, but this one is like, it's like a in between A and B tier album. That's the best way I can describe it. Every song is not amazing, but the highlights of the song, like Lost in the Grandeur, which is one of my favorite songs of the year, as I mentioned in that video as somebody sneezes in my house, the video that I put out a few days ago. I mean, there's lots of very deep songs here, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people get wrong about CARR, because parts of the band have become a meme, but they've always written about very deep subject material, and that is also shown here. Start the Healing is, I think, the first single, or was one of the first singles of this album, and that song title alone should say enough. It is a very well produced album, very well played through. I actually now want to listen to it again, although I don't love that album cover. It is very strange. This is an awesome album. The CARR by Arctic Monkeys is an album that I unfortunately took a while to listen to. I don't know why, because I'm a very big Arctic Monkeys fan, although I haven't listened to all their albums. I have listened to the first 3, I think, yeah. So first one, Favorite Worst Nightmare, and then AM, and I think they're all great records, and the CARR is something different. I haven't heard the album that came before this, so I don't know if this kind of slower, more mellow change was something that has already happened, or if this is something on this album. Like, I'm being completely transparent, but I really enjoyed it. It's something that not everybody will love, especially if they come from big songs like Are You Mine or Do I Want to Know, like songs like that. It's a very slow and album that creeps up on you. And that's what I really appreciate. I think that Alex Turner's vocals were just, of course, perfect for what he does. I mean, his voice is like no other. You hear it, you know instantly who it is, and he always commands your attention. I think it's just the quality of his voice, and I don't mean like how good it is, just there's something about the actual sound quality of his voice, if that makes sense, that really stuck with me. It is slow, and sometimes it did not hold my full interest, but there are specific songs on here, ones that you've probably heard on the radio or heard somewhere else, that really did stick with me, and I would like to listen to this album more and more just to see, and then going back and listening to the previous 2 or 3, whatever has come out since AM and this one, to see how similar it is. But it's a really great record, and if you haven't heard it, you should. It's one of the most well-produced and best-sounding albums sonically of the year. It's something you should all check out. Of course, I have to talk about the end so far, or the end for now, as it was improperly called on this pressing and a ton of other pressings. This is quite possibly my favorite album of the year. It goes between this and Fear of the Dawn. I think quality-wise, consistently, this one is my favorite. I'd say I saw Slipknot before this album came out, but looking at all the songs once you get on here, it just impresses me that they were still able to move forward with their career, especially after everything that's happened in the past year with Joey. And I know Jay's been a member since 2014, but still, it's a very nice progression for them, and it's not the same old thing. We have very slow songs. Adderall, the song that starts off this album, is a slow, perfectly mixed. This is probably the best mixed album of the year, at least for the drum sound. I mean, Jay's drum sound is just, oh, it's so good. But Yen is one of my favorite songs from Slipknot in general, and one of my favorite songs of the year. All the singles were great, but then we have some underrated ones. You know, Desaad was great, Finale is great. All the songs on this album were really great. There's parts of them that really stick with me. Medicine from the Dead, Drink Me. So many moments here that just blew me away. Corey's vocals, this is the best he sounded since mid-2000s, maybe like All Hope Is Gone era. I say that's a fair assumption. I love the use of the clean vocals versus the raw and just brutal screams. This is, as I said, the best he sounded, but just as a band, it's the best they've sounded in a bit. I really do like We're Not Your Kind, but I do prefer this album, honestly. I think it is probably number 4 for my albums for them, which is higher than some people. A lot of people did not expect the slower and more atmospheric sound of this album, but that's why I loved it. It really felt like it took me I just realized I wasn't recording, but what I was saying is it really felt like it took me somewhere else that they haven't taken me before, and that's what I really appreciate. I hope I didn't talk too much without it actually recording here. It has a limit on 20 minutes, so sometimes I forget that. But the second last one I want to talk about, I'll wrap this up, is The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. I have a review of this album, but I think for Megadeth, this is just an awesome album. You got an artist that is, almost 40 years, about 40 years into their career, and still putting out albums as good as this. It's very impressive. Is it my favorite from Megadeth? No. Is it my favorite of the year? No. But as a metal album, a thrash album in 2022, it is awesome. There are some sweet songs here. There's some stuff you wouldn't expect, like a feature of Ice-T, which is, when did you think you'd ever get that? Some of the covers, I mean, if you consider the extras, like the punk covers aren't amazing, but there are some awesome moments. It does feel very futuristic, just like, you look at the album cover, you listen to the album, and it's like, that's exactly what it sounds like. So I always have to give credit to awesome album art, and of course all the guitar playing, bass work, everything out of this world. Is it weird that now we have even more new members with Dave? Sure, but it's all done extremely well. Again, I have a full review of this and a bunch of these albums here, but finally we have Unlimited Love by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I did not listen to their second album yet. I think it's just sometimes that I find this with most of their records is that they are too long, and the same thing happens with Unlimited Love. A lot of people didn't like it, but I really enjoyed it. I can't say that this song was my favorite, this part was my absolute favorite, but I've listened to the album twice now, and it definitely overstays its welcome a little bit, but... Oh, hi. Coming to say hi to everybody? Okay, bye. Having John back really changed everything. I think this is the best album they've put out in well over a decade. That's for sure. But ever since I heard Black Summer, I was like, okay, they are doing something great with this album. Again, does it change the game? Does it change everything? No. Are there a few times where these songs are, I'm like, okay, that's so Red Hot Chili Pepper. That's so Anthony, like, you know, that happens sometimes, but I think the whole group dynamic is really back. Very strong. Again, I have not listened to their second album. I don't know if this one or that one's better, but you look at that album cover and you're like, I know I'm going to listen to something great. I really enjoyed this record, but what was your favorite album of the year? I want to know down below. As I said, it would probably be for me between The End So Far and Fear of the Dawn, but I also really love Entering Heaven Alive and Earthling, and some of these albums, although they weren't my favorite, Come On You Know, Mr. Morale, and stuff like that, they were still solid albums. I don't listen to a Drake album or something I know I'm gonna hate. Like, I'm not gonna listen to Drake, come on. Not Machine Gun Kelly, because, you know, he's the worst, but still. What was your favorite or least favorite song and album of the year? Check out my favorite songs of the year up here. In a few days, I will have my favorite movies of the year, maybe a video on TV shows, and thank you all for watching. I will see you guys next time. Over and out.